Okay, so as we start this morning, did you get a worksheet, Paul? Do you have one? There's some right there. So not a big crowd, but I can already tell I have the key people of the church sitting in on this class this morning. So no, it's good to have you this morning. And I do want to talk a little bit about the importance of church and how do we get people in to a church is what I'd like to talk about. So again, my name is Chuck DeClean, and I'm from the Des Moines area, and I'm involved in what's called the Engage Network. The Engage Network is made up of a Saylorville church, which is what we call the mother church, and about 19 years ago, they came up with the idea. They wanted to build a gym for their church, and it didn't turn out as supported by enough people, so financially they couldn't. And then people said, why don't you start a church instead of building a gym? And Pastor Pat said, that sort of rings true with me. Maybe we should be moving in that direction. So they went out, started a church, Lakeside Fellowship with Dave Heisterkamp. It went really well. They took about 40 or 50 people from that church, and they went out to Lakeside, which was right close by, and they started a church. And it took a while, but it started to run, and they started to gather people, and then eventually they built the building, but they met in schools for quite a while. And out of that church, then there was a guy, Josh Daggett, who said, I think I should start a church. So he had worked with Dave, so he went to the south side of Des Moines, and he started a church. And one of the guys we sent with Josh was Greg Pollock, who had come to know the Lord at Saylorville. I actually worked with him personally. I knocked on his door, and he started to come to Saylorville. But he was a gifted guy. He went with Josh, and then he said, I think God wants me to start a church. So he went to Altoona. He started a church, and then we sent another young guy with him, Jason Gerwill, and Jason looked at what was going on. He said, I think at Winterset, which is about an hour out of Des Moines, I think I should start a church. They're all learning from each other. And then what happened, I was working at Saylorville at the time. There was a guy at Lakeside at the first church plant that said, I think God has gifted me to start a church. And so he decided to start a church in Ankeny. He appealed to me that, Chuck, I'd like to have you come on this new church plant. Now, I learned it's sacrifice to go to a new church plant. You go to a place, you have nothing. You have meet in a school and all of that. So we started a church. Diane and I went with him, started a church, and it's 5 years old right now, and it's doing really well. I think last Sunday, of course, we thought it was going to be a down Sunday. And we thought, we have plenty of chairs, but we ended up having over 400 people come to our service last. Now, we were averaging a little over 300, but it came to about 400. And so then 2 years into our church plant, my son-in-law and daughter had come from a church, and they thought God was leading them to start a church. So they went to Huxley, about a half in between Ames and Des Moines, and they started a church, and they're doing really well. And then the pastor's son at Saylorville wanted to start a church in Des Moines, so he did. So it's just growing. So there's one main church, 7 church plants, but it's sort of exciting to see what God is doing. We're always excited. I hate missing church at our church. I'm a greeter. I go out and try and invite people. I want to be there and meet everyone. I hate missing greeting. And we have our church now, we bought a building already. We bought a building, has a big foyer. I mean, anyway, it's a great place to meet people. And that's what's going on. I missed that this morning, but I really enjoy being there. And we just met somebody we think might be the next church planter. And I'm excited about it. We met him just this last week. It was pretty amazing. So we're hoping maybe we could plant another church. That's what we're hoping. We might be a little aggressive on that, but we're hoping to do that. But what we're talking about this morning is getting people into church. Not always an easy thing to do when you think of the world outside of us. Are they normally attracted to our type of church, or are they repulsed a lot of times? And I think if you look at it, people are a little bit afraid to come into our type of church, and maybe for some good reason, but that's what we want to talk about this morning. How do we overcome that? So I want to do that in two ways this morning. First, I want to look at the church itself. And this is something that I am learning. What I'm going to share at the beginning, they're not things that I did naturally. In fact, as I went on the new church plant, I'm a little bit older than most of you there, and I am learning new things. And I want to share that with you because this is actually different than what I've done my whole life as far as church. But the first thing that we want to talk about, it says in point 1, and I do say, keep in mind every church has its own setting, its own people, and its own target people. So you can't just take what a church does in one place and say, I'm going to do exactly what that church does in our area. You cannot do that. You can listen to what takes place, but your target culture may be very different. The people in your church may be very different depending on the church. You have to take all of that into mind. I want to share a little bit of that in what I've learned in the new church plant that I've gone to. But the very first thing that I would like to do, notice it says, be a caring church to your community. How does the community know that your church cares for them or are interested in them? Now, a little history of our type of church in some of our struggles, which I lived through, and maybe Anthony, Paul, you guys can identify this. Our churches want to make sure that we proclaim the truth and we don't want to back away from that truth. There's nothing wrong. We have a Bible message that we need to share with the world. Is everybody going to be fond of our message that we're going to share with the world? No, they're not. But do we have the authority to change the message? No, we don't. Our responsibility is to share what God has given. Whether the world likes it or not, we have to share what Jesus said. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father but by me. That's not popular. Everybody thinks, no, every road leads to God. That's the popular message. But Jesus didn't share that because he loved us, he died for us, he gave himself for us. There's only one way to come to God, and that's through Jesus. So we, as a group of churches, I'm just talking about, want to defend the truth. That's what we want to do. Well, there needs to be a balance. I don't know how many of you listened to Chris Lightfoot yesterday, but he talked about heavy grace and heavy truth. And he showed that if you have heavy grace and heavy truth, you're going in the right direction. But a lot of times churches can be heavy on the truth. Well, that's what we do sort of naturally. We want to make sure the truth is there. The ones with heavy grace are going to back away from doctrine. And there's a lot of churches doing that. We know we can't do that. We have to take a stand on what the Bible says. So this is what happens, though. If you're heavy on the truth, you can sort of hold separation from the world as your badge. In our movement, we have done that. As a young pastor, I was so convinced we got to present the truth that our church, to a certain degree, became isolated from the community. They often would look at our church, probably think, what in the world goes on in that building? They don't seem to really be involved in the community. I think they stand for truth, whatever it is, but we became isolated. Is that good or bad? Yeah, normally It's bad, especially if you want to invite people to your church and you're an isolated church. Is it going to be easier or more difficult to get people to come to your church? It's going to be more difficult. And that's what we have faced. We stand for the truth. We're isolated. And that's a church that's heavy on the truth. So, how do we address that? Well, to me, we have to, if we're going to stand for the truth, and we should stand for the truth, aren't we going to have to be heavy on caring for the community if we want to reflect God's character? Is God heavy on the truth? Yes. Is God heavy on grace? Yes. Does God care for our community? Yes. So if we're going to be heavy and biblically balanced, which one do we normally have to work on more, a church like ours? Well, it's somehow letting the community know that you're interested in them, that you care for them. Do churches like ours normally do that, or is it simply easy to stay heavy on the truth and not be concerned about that? Too often, we lean in that direction. As a young pastor, I wanted to preach the truth when I was in Carroll, Iowa. Now, God did a wonderful work in Carroll, Iowa, but I was heavy on the truth. I never even thought about getting involved in the community. That's sad, but I never really thought about it that much. I'm just going to preach the truth. If people want to hear it, praise the Lord. I'll try and invite them to come, and I hope they come. Well, it was a strong Catholic community, so there wasn't a lot of interest in our church as far as the people in the area. But God graciously saved a number of families, and God did a great work. But I don't think I thought this through. I was busy what I was doing, and God was blessing that. But I never got involved in the community. So I go to this new church plant, and I'm starting to watch how these young guys work. And I start to learn some things that I probably should have learned long ago. Now, God, I worked in Ecuador as well. It was a little bit different there. So how do you share and become a part of your community and at the same time stand for the truth? Aren't you, like, if you read early Christianity, if you listen to Tim Keller is a great teacher. He worked in New York City. But I remember listening to some of the things that he said, and as he went through, he talked about several things on how the church cared for the poor. And he said what was interesting as he did some reading on it is that in the early church, he talked about one in particular called the Antoninian Plague, 166 to 189. And what happened is the Roman Empire and the authorities, because the plague was really impacting so many people, they sometimes would extract people from their homes and just push them off to the side, hoping they could beat the plague. They had no compassion on the people whatsoever. They just wanted to hold the plague back. Guess what the Christians did? The Christians of that day would take people in and care for them. He writes in the City of Lyons, in that section of Lyons, and I don't have all the geography with that, but he said before the plague, there were few believers in this area. After the plague was over and ran its course, and the Romans were surprised at these Christians. What? They're putting their life on risk. But even some of the secular people wrote down, these people aren't afraid to die. You know, and that should be true, shouldn't it? After the whole thing was over, there were 200,000 believers in an area that had few believers. And it was because of the caring Christians. And even secular writers knew that, and they saw that happen on a number of occasions. So in a biblical setting, that church or whatever, the people did show the community that they cared. And it went a long ways. And I think if you read in the book of Acts, what did they do in the book of Acts? What did the early believers do in the book of Acts? And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. What did they do when there were needs for food and stuff like that? Paul, do you know what they did?
Yeah, they all pitched in and covered the needs. Acts 2, Acts 4.
Yeah.
So no one was in want.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how it's worded.
Yeah, but it says that in the book of Acts. Now, were they also persecuted? Yeah. So they all happened at the same time. But believers began to understand it was their purpose to care for the people around them. Within the church, first of all, in fact, in Galatians it says that we ought to treat well the people, first of all, that carry the name of Christ, but it goes beyond that. So there should be a caring element of the church. So here's the question. The question has to be asked of every church. Does the community out there know that this church cares for them? That's a tough question, isn't it? So now I watch these young guys at the church plant that they asked me to come because they thought Chuck will do evangelism. We need that. We want him to come. So I wanted to go. But this is what they did that was different than what I had done, and I'm learning. So I'm coming to you this morning as a learner. So this is what they did. As we started the church, and there's just several things I want to bring out here as we go through this. Number one, they did a foster care night. Now, I'm hoping even here, you guys have some of these things in place. It might be different because of the church makeup, but I want to encourage you to develop even more. Foster night. Why did they do foster night? Well, in our church, there were a number of families within our church as we started that had foster kids. They automatically had a burden for foster kids. Now, this could be a positive testimony to a community because sometimes these agencies look hard to find people that would take in foster kids. In the Des Moines area, I know this for a fact, in the Des Moines area, even the secular world sees these Christian churches are taking people in. So who do they go? Where do they go to find foster parents? Well, they have a program you have to go through and get the training, but they've realized, boy, a lot of these people are coming from these churches. And so we had some of those people in our church that were fostering, and then sometimes they adopt. And so what they decided to do in our church in Ankeny, they decided since that was something that Ankeny did, they'd have a foster care night. What that means is people in our church set up a night where anybody in Ankeny can come and bring their foster kids, and we'll watch them for a night, and they can go out for a date and do whatever they want to do. And numbers of people came. And some from other churches, others not connected to a church. But even if you don't get many people, you still reach out and let people know. Does that affect how the community looks at your church? It does. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So was it promoted through the local foster care?
Yes, there was a local foster care type of thing. So several of the families know the organizations, and so they let that know in the organization because they're a part of it. That goes out. Like I say, next Sunday we have a man from Lucas County foster care is going to have a table here because there's such a great need in Toledo, Lucas County, and that kind of thing. And so for foster families, and so and you say this strikes it interesting because this man's going to be just here to let our people know that there is such a need here. So I didn't know if by doing that as a church, because I know that foster care, like you said, you have to go through some type of training, right? I mean, there's
so even to have someone watch these kids. I didn't know if there was any stipulations to that.
No, not as far as watching the kids for the night. You're okay with that. But they do look into all the legal ramifications more than what I do. I mean, every person is vetted in our church if they're going to watch kids. They go through. They always go through, yeah. So they'll go through that before they do that, but they'll watch the kids. And people are encouraged. But let's say you're in the community, you're not even interested in foster care. But if you realize, hey, one thing we learn about that church really loves foster kids. That's neat. Now, I'm just trying to say we have to create the whole idea of a church caring. It does do that. It does do that. And so I'm thankful. And when I look at foster kids, I have a deeper, deeper respect for those who adopt. It is not an easy task. It is great sacrifice, but you're taking kids out of homes or whatever that may not hear the gospel, and you're bringing them into homes where they can. Now, I mean, I don't want to say there's not a risk. I mean, this is not easy, but they do that. So it's a good ministry to start with. But again, we're trying to create a church that cares for the community. And they do it naturally. And I say, you know, when I looked at it, I said, keep in mind every church has its own setting, its own people, and its own target people. So that was natural to us to do that. That was something we should do. And you know, when I think of that, even if you do a kids program right and invite people, that can be a big thing as well. I mean, you just want to keep in mind, we want our community to know. Now, here's something else they did. And this was different to me. So this, I'm just going to tell you. Angela, so Adam, our lead pastor, and Angela, young people, when I say young, they're a lot younger, probably in their 30s, they want our church to know the community. So on purpose, they became board members at what is called Ankeny Services. They became board members. What is Ankeny Services? Ankeny Services, because Ankeny is a pretty well-to-do community, and they do still have people that have needs in Ankeny. And people are looking for groceries at times. They've gone through COVID and all of that. They're looking for groceries, clothing. And so that's the agency in Ankeny that people are sent to. So Adam and Angela both became board members. Listening. So this is what happened. We bought a building a little bit over a year ago, so we couldn't have done this prior. But last Christmas, we did do this. So what happens is there are people in Ankeny that have extra funds, and then Ankeny Services organizes and says, could you help some families that don't have the money to buy Christmas gifts? Could you give? And so we could help these families that can't buy Christmas gifts. It's a good idea, isn't it? It's a great idea. And Ankeny responds to that. They respond to that. Ankeny's a progressive, and they think in that area. So Ankeny Services oversees that. Well, Angela and Adam are on the board. So what Ankeny Services normally does is they just have a small storefront. They're a nonprofit organization, so they don't have a lot of funds to spend. So they just have a small storefront. When that happens, they invite the families to come and pick up the presents. That's what they've done for a number of years. Well, we just got a building. So Ankeny Services, in their board discussion, they started to say, hey, New City, could we use your church to do this? What do you think Adam and Angela said? You bet we can. Now, they went beyond. This is what Adam and Angela and a number of the young people, we have a creative group that gets together to think through these things. This is what so what they decided to do, we have a photographer in our church. Why don't we not only give out the gifts, why don't we set up a place where they could come in, and if they would like a family picture taken, we could do that for them. Then some of these families never learned how to make Christmas cookies and decorate. Let's set up a booth with cookies, frosting, and decoration. So they set that up. Then they set up, if they come in with their kids, and let's set up where they can get clothes and shoes, and they can come through that part of it. Then let's set up a program where they can watch videos and play some games with the kids as they came in. So they set that up. Then they set up in the back of the church, they call it Santa's Workshop. The kids can't go into Santa's Workshop. Only the adults can go in Santa's Workshop. And it worked. It worked. On Friday night, I think they had over 400 people come through. And then Saturday, I was there Saturday greeting people. There was probably 300 people that came through. What was interesting, not everybody, but some families, we just picked up presents last year, but wow. If you're going to do this, I'm going to go home and get the kids because we'll be back. We'll be back. They came back, family pictures. They decorated cookies. And what I did watch is our church was so ready to serve in this capacity. And they loved to do it. It took a lot of people. And then what they did is the kids played and did this and that, and they decorated cookies and got their but then the adults would go to the workshop, and they would pick up the presents, and they could haul the presents to their car and stick them in the trunk so the kids couldn't see them. It was perfect. There were people crying, going to their cars. They couldn't believe the presents. Did we buy the presents? No, we didn't buy the presents. I don't know if we could do that. But there were enough presents, and they were good presents. But we didn't do that. All we were a part of that community that gave out. What does the people of the community knows Ankeny serves involved, but I bet you that church is buying some of those presents, which we weren't. I mean, we would tell them, we don't buy the presents at all. We're just here to give them out. So, again, what I'm talking about, though, this is what I'm watching, this is what I'm learning. What does that do to the community? You know, I was out just 2 months ago. There's a Hispanic family that I had followed up with, hadn't seen them now for 2 years. And somehow they showed up at our church out of the blue. And I couldn't even remember their names, Jose and Ana. I couldn't remember the names because it's been 2 years since I've seen them. And they said, we wondered if you were at this church because we came here to pick up Christmas gifts. And we thought maybe you would be at this church. That's why they came. So the Christmas gifts connected. And when we did another thing here, this school bash, another family, we came up here we remember coming to this church to pick up Christmas gifts last year. So it does impact the community. That's what I'm saying. You worked hard. That just fell into our laps, but I want to say this. Adam and Angela knew we want to be a part of this community. And this is one way we can do that. Now, the topic we have is getting people to church. If the community knows that you have a caring church, is it easier or harder to get people to come to church if you're a caring church? It's easier. It's easier. So I'm going through things that I've learned. These are not, here's another thing that we did. Just did it a couple of weeks ago. And when you had your inflatables, it reminded me of that. So it would have been right in the middle of August. So that's not very long ago. Again, here's our creative committee coming up with an idea. We're going to have a back to school bash is what they called it. Now, we learned about it because our church plant that was up in Huxley had a church come to them as a new church. Hey, we would like to give you money to set up inflatables, invite the kids and everything. Oh, okay, Stephen said, we'll do it. So they have a park up in Huxley. So over a year ago, they set up, put the inflatables up. They provided the lunch, everything. They went out into the community, invited them. And he said there was well over 200 people that came to that and just played and doing different things. It was a great idea to introduce them to the community. They did it again this year, just a little bit ago. Same turnout. And so I think our creative committee, wow, we're learning from a church plant that we did. We should do something like that. So we did. So we invited, what we did, we had passed out door hangers throughout. We had 1,000 of them to give because we have apartment buildings on one side. We have a trailer park. We wanted to make sure that we got to those because poor families live there. We wanted to reach out. So what we were going to have, inflatables, we were going to have pulled pork, sandwiches, and everything, a great lunch. And then we're going to have some of our ladies do paint the faces of the kids. And but we thought we were going to invite them to the service, but by mistake on our flyers, we didn't put anything in about the service. and Nathan said, I think we missed that. But so we didn't invite anybody to our services, just to the lunch. Just to the lunch that happened right after this is what we found out. First of all, our people, you figure, well, all the people of the church, they're always going to be faithful. Well, we know that doesn't always happen. So when we were going to do that for our church, everybody came to church. I mean, with their kids. And I don't know, I think we had close to 400 people that day. But we expected that. We were doing something special. Last week, there was nothing special. We had over. But anyway, they were there. But then we had gone out into the community, passed out flyers. Now, sometimes we think that's not going to draw people. And you're right, it doesn't draw a lot of people. I'll tell you what happened. But even if we didn't get anybody to come to that, are we sending a message to our community? Boy, a church is offering free lunch, inflatables for the kids. Whether they come or not, what happens in their mind when you do that? We did have people come. We had numbers of people came. I'm going to just mention some of the people that I met that came up to that event. Tyler and Kayla came up. A young couple, not married long, has 3 kids. They each had one on their own with the previous, and then they also had a child together. They came up because they lived in that trailer park. Somebody put a hanger on their door, so they just came. And we served them lunch. I looked for them. I had several families work with them as they came through. At the end, I said to them, hey, I have this Bible study booklet. Because you don't necessarily get their information, could I drop that off at your house? Yeah. And, okay, could I get your address? Sure. Now, I know what I want to do with people, so I just wanted to know where they lived and meet them. So I went over to their house on Monday night after the bash. I said, hey, this is that Bible study booklet. It just goes through, explains how you gain eternal life. This is the booklet that I use. It just explains how you gain eternal life. What we love to do is, if it's possible, is I'd like you to look at the first lesson of this book. I think you'd really enjoy it. And I don't know if there's a time you could, but could we, I'd love. And they said, we're sort of interested in that. We've talked a little bit about that. And so they said yes. I said, well, when can you do that? She said, well, Saturday. So they came, I set it up for Saturday. Then they texted me. I got their telephone number, though. And I said, hey, looking forward to doing it. And they said, hey, Chuck, we got so much going on Saturday. We can't do that. But then they said, hey, what about Sunday after the service? Well, they've never been to a service at our church. So this is a win. That means they're coming up to church. I said, that would be perfect. So I set it up, and they showed up. And then after the service was over, I went into the back room, and we did the first study. And I said, did you enjoy this? Yeah, we did. Do you want to do the second one? Yeah, we'd like to do the second one. I said, does this time work well for you? Yes, it's about the only time in our week. They both work, and they have the kids and all of that. They said, yep. So they came up the second time, the second Sunday. So I went into the back room. I had a faith student with me this time. And they both prayed to receive the Lord last Sunday after services. And I thought, wow, this has gone really well. I praise the Lord for that. But it was people that ran and put these door knocker things over. It doesn't. And then I met another lady, Lucia, and she came up with her 3 kids, Hispanic. So I talked with her in Spanish when she came up, but she could speak English as well. And she said, we really enjoyed this. We have a church though. And I said, well, that's fine. My husband, she said, my husband just came to know the Lord about a month ago, and we go to the Hispanic church, and but we thought we'd come up and visit. Now we have a kids club that'll start at the end of September, and I said, we have a kids club because they live in the apartments that are really close to our church. I think, would your kids be in? Yeah, I think we would. So I have to go back there yet. I know where she lives. I asked, she told me where she lives, and I have that, so I'll follow up. Then there was another lady that came up with her family. Kari is her name. And somebody invited her. She didn't live real close, but because we had that, so she came up, and I visited with her and her husband, Keegan, and they have 3 kids. And I said, hey, we'd love to drop a booklet off to your house. I think you'd enjoy it. And she said, okay, here's my name. Here's my address. Now, the first time I went over there, they weren't they weren't there. So did I just drop the booklet off? Would you just drop the booklet off if they weren't home? No, I'm not. Since it works so hard, I'm going to find them home. So I went back the second time, found her home, chatted with her. I said, boy, we would sure love to do a study if you have a chance. Let me leave this with you. And she couldn't. I have to get a hold of her as soon as I go back, but I know where she's at. They've not been to church. They just came up to that special event. There was another, Francesca came up with her daughter. They're coming to church. She may be a believer. So there was a response from the community over that. But I say this, even if there had not been anyone, we're still planting what kind of church we are. We're a church that loves our community. I know I'm going long, but these are the little things that I learned. Here's another thing this is your creative planning committee at our church. Do you have a creative planning committee here at all? Anyway, we have one. I wouldn't have organized one. I didn't even know we needed one. We needed one. So they came up with another idea. Because they're on Ankeny services and they stay in touch with the community, and we used to use the park for our services when we didn't have a building, there's an Ankeny Summerfest that takes place. It's huge. And so they have a theme every summer. So guess what? This creative committee, again, I didn't think the way they did. We wait to do our VBS theme until we hear what Ankeny is going to do with their theme. Then we try to organize a VBS after the Ankeny theme. And normally it's a general theme that you can organize something, so that's what we did. It had to do with ships and water this year, and so this is what, again, depends what your people. So we have some engineers in our church, and they love to build things. They built a whole little ship and different things on it that worked, and so they award first place to the best float. Well, the last 3 years we've won first place every single. And it's funny, you're walking the parade, 40,000 people come to this parade. Kids passing out candy, there's floats going through, but every time people will say, that is the best float. That's the best float. And so again, what does that say to this is Adam now, the pastor. We're going to win this thing. Every year we're winning this thing. But he wants to present our church. And then we do our VBS. We hand out VBS flyers as we're going on the thing. And does it get a great? No, it doesn't get. There are some new people that come to the VBS, that type of thing. But again, what's the message to the community? Boy, this church is really involved in the community. They're concerned about the community. So that has worked. And it goes beyond that. Not only do they build a float, now then something else came. Now there's doing a food drive at Ankeny. The high school is going to compete. There's 2 major high schools now in Ankeny. It used to be just 1, but now there's 2. They're really good at sports, but now they're going to compete. Food drive. See which school can bring the most, and they have a big, it's like the Iowa State football game. I mean, it's just, everybody's looking at it. So, yeah, so we're not going to be involved in it other than our engineers said, hey, we can build the trophy that's going to be the traveling trophy. I don't have a picture, but they did a bang-up job on it. It's really good. On the back of it's a Bible verse, and they put it in their school for that year because it's that good. We won the trophy. This is the first year they did it, but we're in on it, and now that trophy will, they did presentation at halftime. Which school's going to win this? And we're just excited. So again, I'm just saying, what does the community think about your church? Because I go and knock on doors to newcomers, and it's not odd for me to say, hey, did you go to the Ankeny parade? Yeah. Well, we're that, oh, you're the church that built that float. Oh, okay. It works, it helps, it serves. All I'm trying to say, how do you get people to church? You create a caring church. Do we still have work to do? We have a lot of work to do. It's not perfect, but we want to be known as a caring church. Any questions on that at all? I know I spent a lot of time on that, but this is what I am learning. Heavy on truth, heavy on grace. That's what Chris Lightfoot was teaching yesterday. That's the type of church that we want to be. Here, this is another thing. So our children's pastor actually worked for a school that's only about 6 blocks from so what she did is she organized during the back to the school bash that we had. She organized gifts, found out what the teachers wanted. And so we got gifts, and she took them over there the next Monday. The teachers were elated. One of the teachers has been coming to church now and asking questions, and I think Diane's supposed to meet with her because she's just went through a divorce, and it's been very hard. But she knows about a church that cares and brought gifts to her for her classroom this year. And so all these little things are things, again, I say to you, I did not think about, I did not plan. I am observing, I am learning, I am benefiting as far as presenting the church. So we just get together and do things like that. So the first thing is be a caring church. Be a caring church. Think about it. Brainstorm. How can the community know that we're a caring church? It may take time. You may have to overcome different things, but that's what we shoot for. Okay. The next one is fairly easy on the bottom of the first page. Be a church that is exciting about their Sunday morning gathering. That attitude is apparent as we meet friends or as we go about visiting people. Friendly church, positive message, great child care, casual dress. You guys have all of this. But so you present yourselves. I hope that you're excited about your church. We want people to be excited about our church so that they would invite people and that they would come. So I'm just talking about the attitude of your church. Is it really positive? When people look at it, is it really, really positive? And that's things that the church has to talk about, because that actually does help bring people to church, and you want that. So that's the caring church. Any questions or thoughts on that? That's the church part of it. Okay? Now we have another side to cover that talks about a personal work with individuals. So this is the one I could spend a lot of time on, but I didn't think it was. I just think Here's the question. Is it best to bring an unsaved person to church to share the gospel, or is it best to help one to be saved before you invite them to church? Thoughts out there. And I got a whole list of variables here. What are your thoughts? You meet somebody. Is it best to get them to church as fast as you can, or is it best to just work with them in a gospel presentation before you invite them to church? What do you think, Anthony? What are your thoughts?
I think it could be both. Well, the first time I read the question, I thought, yeah, we should invite unsaved people to church. But then I read the question again, I thought, well, I shouldn't wait until they can come to church to talk to them about the gospel. So depending on which way I was, based on the situation, I guess.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you invite people to church, they're going to say no for
Yeah.
maybe a long time. So for that person, I wouldn't want to, not share the gospel with them. Who knows how long it might be before they might decide to
Yeah.
go to church.
Paul, what are your thoughts? I'm not going to pick on people, but people that can talk, I can pick on them. So what are your thoughts, Paul?
My initial thought is the second half is the preference.
To-
Work with them and see. I don't think that's gonna fit for every, I mean, some people are gonna be more comfortable inviting, in that. We hope everybody feels comfortable sharing the gospel and going through, a Bible study. We've talked about that here. We've had you come and talk about that here, and they would feel comfortable with that. I think that would be, I think, in my mind, the preference, to be
Yeah.
honest, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but I have to be realistic. Everyone's not gonna fall into that category.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. And so, again, one of the things that we tell our people who go through membership class here, what we talk about expectations. What do we expect? What should they expect from us? And then, one thing we talk about, we want to be a place that they feel comfortable inviting a friend.
Yeah.
Bringing
Yeah.
a guest.
So,
And going back to what your previous thing, they don't have to come dressed a certain way.
Yeah.
So on and so forth, and that type of thing. And so I get that, and then from there, Lord willing, maybe they'll get into something. But I like the idea of, people feeling comfortable sharing their gospel, sharing their faith with somebody.
yeah.
And so that to me would be my top one, though I know there has to be a both and in some ways too.
Yeah, it is variable depending on who you are and who that person is. And I say that for this. If you're a person that really is new to the gospel, doesn't know how to explain it very well, doesn't have the confidence in themselves or in the Lord to present it, then by all means, bring them up to church. And if you can't present the gospel in an organized way, then find somebody that can help you with that. In that way, yes, invite them to, and that happens all the time. I am not against that at all. But now, when I work with people, and I just look back, there's so many things that I can go through, but let's just say a person is already into a church, they're faithful to that church, they're not going to be very open to an invitation to come to church. If somebody would have come to me when I was 20 years old before I knew the Lord and said, Chuck, we'd sure like you to come up and visit our church, I may not have told them to their face, but I said, I'm not interested. I already got a church. So you run into people that would be hard to invite them because they're already involved in something. Chris Lightfoot brought up the example of Rosario Butterfield, who was in a lesbian type of relationship, and somebody who taught heavily in that area. And there's a couple that had a burden for her. Did they go to her and say, hey, we'd love to have you come to our church? Would that have worked? No, it wouldn't have worked. And so the couple waited. When I talk about Doug in my life, I shared Doug knew me for a year before he even asked a question. And if he would have asked me to go to church, which he did with some, but he didn't do that with me because he knew I already went to the Catholic Church every single Sunday. He's not going to invite me to church. But he asked me the question to start the spiritual conversations. It depends on the person that you're talking to. That's why I think it can be variable. Now, as I go out, I personally push when I go out and meet people in the neighborhood, I could think of a number of examples. The Willies, the very first couple that I worked with in Ankeny, it took me 3 visits to even ask them if they would consider a Bible study. But I built a friendship, then I built, then I said, hey, I try to do this Bible study, would you be open? And finally they said yes. So I started to go over their house, do the Bible study. Did I invite them to church? No, I didn't. I wanted to go through the Bible study. I wanted them to understand what salvation is. And I thought, I can do that here. And I did. When Sarah made a decision, then yes, I invited them to church. They came up, and then Jeremy got saved shortly after that. But I'm careful on inviting people to church right away. I think of another couple. This was funny. Mike and Stephanie Templeton, who actually came from Saylorville and came. So I met Mike knocking on the doors, and he said okay to a Bible study, and Stephanie said, she wasn't there. What are you doing? We don't know this guy, and you're going to invite him in to do a Bible study? Well, I was able to do a Bible study. They really enjoyed it. And then they decided to come up to church. And they did. And it was a good experience. Then there was a membership class. And they decided, hey, we're going to go to the membership class. Okay, I wasn't thrilled yet because I knew from the political stuff going on, it was political season, they were probably someone that leaned in a totally different direction than our church did. So I was really fearful. I don't know if I want you to go to a membership class. This could just blow everything. But they went. And then after the membership class, they jotted me, Chuck, you really don't need to stop over anymore. We're not going to come to your church. Oh, man, I was so broken because I'd worked so hard. So I didn't know what to do. So what I did is I didn't do anything at the beginning, and winter came. So I waited till spring came, and I said to myself, I'm going to just drive by their house every so often, see if I can catch them outside. Well, I did that several times, didn't catch him. But one day, Mike was working out in the yard. I stopped. Hey, Mike, do you remember? Yeah, Chuck, we remember. I know. I said, hey, I really feel bad because I really wanted to finish that study with you. And would there be any way? I said, you don't have to come up to church at all. Don't even worry about church. I would just like to finish the study. And he said, okay, let's do one more. So I finally made it back into their house, did a study. Then the next time I did the third study, and they enjoyed the study. And Stephanie texted me after the third study where I present, you can gain the righteousness of Christ if you put your faith in him. And she jotted me a note. She said, Chuck, Michael and I prayed for the first time in our life together. And she put this, and it was powerful. That's all she said. I hoped that they had gotten saved. That's what I prayed, because I told them how to do it. And then I went back to another, still did not invite them to church. But I said, after they did the last study, because here's the key. If a person changes in their heart, it's so much easier to invite them to church. And so finally I said, hey, there's some people that are going to get baptized today. I think you'd really, really enjoy coming up. And they came up and watched it, and I introduced them to several people, and then they started to come, and down the road a little bit they got baptized. Do you know what the reason why they stopped coming in the membership class. I did not know this. I thought they heard something political. It was negative. They didn't agree. I'll never see them again. But here's the reason they didn't want to continue. In the membership class, they started to say, to join this church, you have to have a story to share about Christ. And they both looked at each other. We don't have any stories. We don't have any stories at all. I don't think we fit in here. See, in that case, the membership class, it wasn't shared wrong. It wasn't anything political. It's just they said, we don't have a story. So after they got saved, and then they said, now we have something to write about, and they joined the church, and now they came with the new church as well. I had another guy that was very intellectual, and we did a study, and he said this to me. He said, I remember when you first started to come to our house and do the studies, and this was a longer study because, he said, I am so thankful you did not invite us to church because I wouldn't have gone. It would have been a turnoff for me. And then eventually he did come up. Both of them trusted the Lord and walking with the Lord today. But it depends on the person. I think when I think of a number of people here, even my own self, don't give up on people that don't respond if you invite them, but realize it takes longer. But oftentimes, those ones where it takes longer, if they make that decision, they can become dynamic in sharing their faith with others. So you don't give up, you just build friendships, try to take it at the speed they can take. But I actually do push the idea. When I first meet a person on the street I'm talking about, I do not push church attendance at all. I push the Bible study. Now, if they want to come up, I'll say, yeah, come on up, please. But I push the Bible study because I know if I can get them, or the Lord can get them to the place where they make a decision, once the heart changes in the new birth, it is so easy to invite them to church, and it just shows you that the conversion was real. So I guess individually, it's just something that you have to weigh, but both individually and as a church, that's my thoughts at getting people to come to church. And do you want them to come to church? Yes. If you meet people that don't go to church, they claim to be believers, then they will never mature and grow the way God wants them to grow unless they're a part of a church. Everybody's gifted differently. You minister to one another, they won't grow. And so I'm always wanting to get them into the church and to see them grow. Thoughts, questions? We probably need to close in prayer. It's 10 o'clock, isn't it? That's when we're supposed to finish. So I guess we're going to finish right here. So if you have questions, be happy to try and answer them. Let's close in a word of prayer. Father, thank you so much for a chance just to go over the church and trying to get people to come into a place where they can learn more about you. So, Father, help this church to continue to grow as they seek to become the church you want them to be. May you help many people to find Jesus at this church. In Jesus' name, amen.